The bullet wasn't meant for her. It was meant to end the bloodline of the most dangerous man in Chicago. When the first shot cracked through the winter air, everyone froze. The bodyguards, the pedestrians, even the birds. Everyone except her. Sienna didn't think. She didn't calculate the odds. She just moved. When Daniel Vane turned around, he didn't see his empire crumbling. He saw the only woman who had ever looked at his children with love, bleeding out on the pavement. He thought she was just the nanny, a quiet, invisible employee. He was wrong. As her blood stained the snow, Daniel realized two things. There was a traitor in his inner circle, and the woman dying in his arms was the only angel left in his hell, and he would burn the city to the ground if she didn't wake up. Daniel Vane did not like surprises. In his world, a world built on shipping containers, union contracts, and silent wars fought in the back rooms of Chicago steakhouses, surprises were usually fatal. He lived his life by a strict code of absolute control. His suits were bespoke Italian wool, his schedule was calibrated to the minute, and his penthouse atop the Vane Tower was a fortress of glass and steel. But the one thing he couldn't control was the silence that had filled the hallway since his wife died 3 years ago. "Mr. Vane, the car is ready." Daniel turned away from the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Lake Michigan. Standing in the doorway was Silas, his erratic but loyal chief of staff. Silas was chewing on a toothpick, a habit Daniel detested. "Where are the twins?" Daniel asked, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the room. "Downstairs. The nanny has them bundled up. You promised them the winter festival today, Dom. You back out now, and Leo is going to scream the roof off." Daniel checked his Rolex, a vintage Daytona. He had a meeting with the Bratva at 2 p.m. He had 30 minutes to be a father. "Fine, tell the detail we move in 5. And Silas, tell the nanny to stay in the background. I don't want press photos of her." "You got it, boss." Down in the lobby, Sienna Brooks was trying to keep a mitten on 3-year-old Mia's hand while 5-year-old Leo tried to climb a marble pillar. "Leo, please get down," Sienna whispered, her voice soft but firm. She was 24, with chestnut hair usually tied back in a severe bun to look more professional. She wore a thick, unremarkable grey wool coat. She knew her place here. She was the help. She was invisible. Sienna had been working for the Vane family for 6 months. In that time, she had spoken to Daniel Vane exactly 4 times. He was a terrifying figure, a man carved out of ice and violence. He never raised his voice, but the way he looked through people, as if assessing their net worth or their killability, sent shivers down her spine. She loved the kids, though. They were starved for affection. Their mother was gone, and their father was a ghost who left cash on the counter, but rarely gave hugs. The elevator chimed, and the lobby temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Daniel stepped out, flanked by 3 large men. He wore a charcoal overcoat, the collar turned up. He didn't look at Sienna. He looked at the twins. "Papa!" Leo jumped from the pillar. Daniel caught him, but stiffly. "Leo, what did I say about running in the lobby?" "Sorry, Papa." Daniel's eyes finally flicked to Sienna. They were the color of gunmetal. "Ms. Brooks, keep them close. I have 20 minutes at the park. If the press crowds us, take them back to the car immediately." "Yes, Mr. Vane," she said, clutching Mia's hand. As they walked toward the convoy of black Cadillac Escalades waiting at the curb, Sienna felt a prickle on the back of her neck. It was a sensation she hadn't felt in years, not since she had left her old life behind in Detroit. A sense of being watched. She scanned the street. Chicago was gray and biting cold. Pedestrians had their heads down against the wind. But across the street, near a parked delivery van, a man in a blue hoodie was standing too still. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was looking at the lead car. "Mr. Vane," Sienna said, stepping forward. Daniel paused, his hand on the car door. He looked annoyed. "What is it?" "The itinerary," she lied quickly, her heart hammering. "Did we change the route? The usual entrance to the park is blocked by construction." Silas laughed from behind Daniel. "Relax, sweetheart. We know the routes. Get in the car." Daniel stared at her for a second longer, his eyes narrowing. He was a predator. He sensed fear. But he dismissed it. "Get in, Sienna." It was the first time he had ever used her first name. They drove in silence. Sienna sat in the back with the twins, while Daniel sat in the middle row, reviewing documents on a tablet. The air in the car smelled of leather and Daniel's cologne, sandalwood and cold rain. When they arrived at Millennium Park, the VIP security detail cleared a path. The winter festival was crowded, filled with the smell of roasted nuts and hot cocoa. Daniel walked ahead with Leo, his bodyguards forming a tight diamond formation around him. Sienna walked a few paces back, carrying Mia. For a moment, it looked like a normal family outing. Leo pointed at the giant Christmas tree, and for a split second, the hard lines of Daniel's face softened. He actually smiled. He loves them, Sienna thought, surprised. He just doesn't know how to show it without protecting them to death. "Papa, look! The ice skaters!" Leo shouted, pulling Daniel's hand toward the rink. The security detail shifted. Silas, who was leading the point, stepped aside to take a phone call. That was wrong. Sienna's stomach dropped. Standard protocol for a high-value target was complete radio silence during a walk. You never break formation. She looked at Silas. He was nodding at someone on the other end, his eyes scanning the rooftops. Not the crowd. Then she saw the flash. It wasn't a camera. It was the glint of sun off a scope in the window of a building overlooking the park. "Get down!" Sienna screamed. She didn't wait for permission. She didn't wait for the bodyguards to react. She dropped Mia to the snow and threw her body over the stroller, lunging forward to grab Leo. Crack! The sound was like a whip snapping, followed instantly by the wet thud of impact. Sienna felt a sledgehammer hit her right shoulder. The force spun her around. She gasped, the air leaving her lungs, but her momentum carried her forward. She tackled Leo, covering his small body with hers, as a second shot shattered the pavement exactly where the boy's head had been a second ago. Pandemonium erupted. "Shooter! Hi, 12 o'clock! Cover the boss!" Daniel was on the ground, his gun drawn in a blur of motion. He hadn't been hit. He looked up, wild-eyed. He expected to see Leo dead. Instead, he saw his nanny lying in the dirty snow, her grey coat turning a dark, sickening crimson. Underneath her, Leo was crying, safe and untouched. Daniel scrambled over on his hands and knees, ignoring the shouting of his men and the screaming crowd. He grabbed Sienna by the lapels. "Miss Brooks! Sienna!" She blinked, her eyes losing focus. The pain was a hot, searing fire spreading down her chest. She looked up at the man who terrified her. The blue hoodie," she whispered, blood bubbling past her lips. "Silas, let him through." Then her eyes rolled back, and the world went black. Daniel Vane had killed men. He had ordered hits, negotiated truces with warlords, and watched his own father die of cancer. He was acquainted with death. But as he knelt in the slush of Millennium Park, pressing his hand against the wound in Sienna's shoulder, he felt a terror he hadn't experienced since the night his wife died. This woman was a stranger, a paid employee. Why did she jump? "Boss, we have to move, now." Lorenzo, his head of security, a loyal giant of a man, grabbed Daniel's arm. The shooter is still active. Secure the kids, Daniel roared, his voice cracking. He scooped Sienna up in his arms. She was lighter than she looked, frail almost. But the blood soaking his cashmere coat was heavy and warm. They ran. The run back to the SUVs was a blur of chaos. Sirens were wailing in the distance. Daniel didn't put her down. He practically threw her into the back of the reinforced Escalade. "Give me the med kit," he barked at the driver. Daniel ripped open her coat. The bullet had entered just above the collarbone. It was a mess, arterial blood. She was bleeding out fast. "Drive to St. Jude's. Tell them we're coming in hot. I want Dr. Aris ready in the trauma bay. If he's at lunch, drag him out." As the car sped through the Chicago streets, weaving through traffic with sirens blaring, Daniel applied pressure. His hands, usually so steady, were trembling. Leo and Mia were in the car behind them with Lorenzo. They were safe. Because of her. Sienna groaned, her eyelids fluttering. "Stay with me," Daniel commanded, his face inches from hers. "You don't get to die. Do you hear me? That is an order, Sienna." "Is Leo?" Her voice was a breathless rasp. "Leo is fine. You saved him. You took the hit." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Why did you do that?" She didn't answer. She was fading. Daniel looked at her face, really looked at her. For the first time, he noticed the faint scar on her chin. He noticed that her hands, now limp, were calloused, not the soft hands of a college grad nanny. "Silas," she murmured again. Daniel froze. The car hit a pothole, but he didn't feel it. "Silas." He grabbed his phone and dialed Lorenzo in the second car. "Is Silas with you?" "No, boss." Lorenzo's voice crackled over the secure line. "He said he was securing the perimeter. He vanished right after the shots." Daniel snarled, ending the call. The phone screen cracked under his grip. Silas had been with the Vane family for 10 years. He was the godfather to Mia. The blue hoodie. She had seen something. The SUV screeched to a halt at the emergency bay of St. Jude's Hospital, a private facility funded entirely by the Vane Foundation for moments exactly like this. A team of doctors and nurses in blue scrubs rushed the car. "Get her on the gurney! BP is crashing!" Daniel stepped out, his coat ruined, his hands stained red. He watched them cut her shirt open, exposing the pale skin and the devastating wound. He felt a strange, hollow ache in his chest. He wasn't just angry, he was indebted. And in the Vane family, a debt was a bond stronger than steel. He watched the door swing shut as they wheeled her into surgery. "Mr. Vane?" Daniel turned. It was a nurse, holding a plastic bag. "We removed the patient's personal effects. You need to hold these." Daniel took the bag. Inside was a cheap watch, a hair tie, and a wallet. He shouldn't have looked. It was an invasion of privacy, but the adrenaline demanded answers. Who was this woman? He opened the wallet. There was no driver's license, no credit cards, just a fake ID with the name Sienna Brooks and a folded, worn photograph. Daniel pulled the photo out. It was old, maybe 15 years. It showed a young girl, maybe 10 years old, standing next to a man. Daniel recognized the man instantly. It was Arthur the Hammer. Penance, the former enforcer of the Detroit mob, a man Daniel's father had gone to war with decades ago, a man who was supposed to be dead, along with his entire family. Daniel stared at the photo, then at the doors where Sienna had disappeared. She wasn't just a nanny. She was the daughter of his family's greatest enemy. She was a ghost, and she had just taken a bullet for his son. "Lorenzo," Daniel said into his radio, his voice turning deadly calm. "Yeah, boss." "Lock down the hospital. No one goes in or out. And find Silas. I want him alive. I want to take him apart, piece by piece." "What about the girl?" Daniel looked at the blood on his hands. Put a guard on her door. 2 men. If she wakes up, nobody speaks to her but me. She has a lot of explaining to do." Daniel walked into the hospital waiting room. He didn't wash his hands. He wanted the blood there. It was a reminder. The angel wasn't just an angel. She was a liability. Or maybe she was the only person in this city he could actually trust. The sterile beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the VIP suite of St. Jude's Hospital. It was a rhythmic, maddening countdown that Daniel Vane had been listening to for 6 hours. He sat in a leather armchair in the corner of the room, submerged in the shadows. He had finally washed the blood off his hands, but he could still feel the phantom warmth of it. He had changed into a fresh suit brought by Lorenzo, but he hadn't left the room. On the bed, Sienna looked small. Tubes and wires snaked out from under the hospital sheets. Her skin was the color of parchment, making her dark lashes look stark against her cheeks. She was alive, but only just. The bullet had missed her subclavian artery by millimeters. Daniel held the worn photograph in his hand, flipping it over and over. Arthur Penance. The name was a curse in the Chicago underworld. 20 years ago, the Vane and Penance families had fought a war that turned the Detroit River red. Daniel's father had eventually won, driving the Penance clan into oblivion. Arthur was rumored to have died in a fire. And yet, here was his daughter, living in Daniel's house, raising Daniel's children. The door creaked open. Lorenzo stepped in, looking massive and grim. "Boss," Lorenzo whispered. "We tossed her apartment. It's clean, too clean. No computer, no diary, just cash and clothes. But we found something under the floorboards." Lorenzo handed Daniel a burner phone. "One number in the call log. It's a disconnected line in Canada. She's been checking in with someone." Daniel's grip on the phone tightened. "Is Silas found?" "No. He's gone to ground. But we intercepted a wire transfer. Silas received $5 million yesterday from an offshore account linked to the Triad. They're making a play for the shipping lanes." "Silas sold my son for $5 million, Daniel said, his voice devoid of emotion. It was a terrifying sound. "When I find him, he will pray for hell." A soft groan from the bed cut the tension. Daniel was on his feet instantly. He walked to the bedside, his demeanor shifting from warlord to interrogator. Sienna's eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, struggling to focus. She tried to move, but a gasp of pain escaped her lips. "Don't move," Daniel said. "You've been shot." Sienna blinked, the memories of the park rushing back, the snow, the gun. "Leo." "Leo," she rasped. Her throat was dry as sandpaper. "Leo is safe. He's at the estate with a small army guarding him." Daniel poured a glass of water and held the straw to her lips. She drank greedily, her eyes fixed on his. When she finished, she let her head fall back against the pillow. "Thank God. You saved him," Daniel said. He placed the glass down and leaned over her, placing his hands on the railing of the bed. He caged her in. "Why?" Sienna frowned, confused by the aggression in his tone. "He's a child. He's your son. And you are Arthur Penance's daughter." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. Sienna's eyes went wide, the color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a corpse. She stopped breathing. Daniel held up the photo. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? You enter my home. You make my children love you. And all the while, you are the spawn of the man who tried to wipe my family off the map." "It's not what you think," Sienna whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The pain in her shoulder was throbbing, but the fear was sharper. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't unhook these machines and finish what the sniper started," Daniel said. He didn't mean it. He couldn't kill the woman who saved his son, but he needed the truth. He needed to break her. "I ran away," she choked out. "I ran away from him 6 years ago. I changed my name. I wanted nothing to do with that life, Daniel." "Don't call me Daniel. You are an employee, a lying employee." "I am not my father." Her voice rose, surprisingly strong despite her injury. "Arthur was a monster. He beat my mother until she died. He tried to sell me off to settle a debt when I was 18. I fled Detroit. I've been hiding ever since." "Hiding in the home of his enemy? That's a convenient hiding spot, Miss Pennance." "It was the last place he would look," Sienna argued, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. "He thinks the veins would kill me on sight. That's why I applied for the job. I needed safety. I fell in love with the kids. I never wanted to hurt anyone." Daniel studied her face. He was a human lie detector. It was a skill required for survival. He looked for the twitch of a muscle, the diversion of eyes. She held his gaze. Her eyes were terrified. Yes, but burning with a fierce, desperate honesty. "The blue hoodie," Daniel said suddenly. "You mentioned a blue hoodie before you passed out. And Silas." Sienna nodded weakly. "At the park. I saw Silas nod at a man across the street. A man in a blue hoodie. Silas signaled him to take the shot. I saw the scope glint. I didn't think. I just jumped." Daniel stood up straight, pacing the room. Her story aligned with the facts. If she were an assassin planted by her father, she would have let Leo die. She would have let the Vane legacy end. Instead, she took a .308 caliber round to the chest. "My father is looking for me," Sienna whispered, her energy fading. "If you know who I am, then he might know too." "The photo. Where did you get it?" "Your wallet." "He's coming," she murmured, her eyes closing as the morphine drip kicked in. "Arthur never stops. If he finds me—" "Rest," Daniel commanded, his voice softer now. "You are under my protection, and if your father comes for you, he'll have to go through me." He watched her drift back into unconsciousness. The anger was still there, simmering, but it was complicated now. She was an enemy by blood, but a savior by action. The door opened again. Lorenzo looked urgent. "Boss, we have a problem." "What?" "A nurse just tried to access the floor. Security checked her badge. It was a fake. She had a syringe full of potassium chloride in her pocket." Daniel's eyes turned to black ice. "Where is she?" "We have her in the stairwell. She's not talking. But boss, she has a tattoo on her wrist. A hammer." Daniel looked back at Sienna, sleeping vulnerably in the bed. The war hadn't ended 20 years ago. It was just waking up. St. Jude's Hospital was no longer safe. It was a sieve, and the rats were leaking in. Daniel moved fast. He didn't wait for doctor's approval. He ordered his men to prep the armored transport. "We move her tonight," Daniel told Lorenzo. "Take her to the fortress. Set up a med bay in the guest wing. Get Dr. Aris to come with us. If he refuses, buy the hospital and fire him." "Understood." Moving a critical patient was risky, but leaving her there was a death sentence. The assassin nurse with the hammer tattoo confirmed Sienna's fear. Arthur Pennance was alive, and he knew exactly where his daughter was. The hit in the park might have been dual purpose: kill the Vane heir and eliminate the runaway daughter in the crossfire. At 2 a.m., the hospital loading dock was swarming with Daniel's men. They moved Sienna, still unconscious and hooked up to portable monitors, into the back of a converted ambulance that Daniel owned. Daniel sat in the back with her. He watched the city blur by through the bulletproof glass. Chicago was beautiful at night, lights reflecting off the snow and the black water of the lake. But it felt like a cage. They drove north, out of the city, to Lake Forest. The Vane estate, known as the Fortress, sat on 10 acres of cliffside property overlooking Lake Michigan. It was surrounded by 12-foot stone walls, motion sensors, and a private security team that rivaled the Secret Service. When they arrived, the gates groaned open, and the convoy swept up the long, heated driveway. They wheeled Sienna into the master guest suite on the ground floor. It was a room larger than most apartments, with French doors opening to a view of the turbulent lake. Daniel had ordered the room prepped with medical equipment. For the next 2 days, Sienna drifted in and out of a fever. Daniel barely slept. He managed his empire from a laptop in the corner of her room. He ordered hits on the Triad members who had funded Silas. He burned down 3 warehouses belonging to the Penance faction in Detroit as a warning. But mostly, he watched her. On the 3rd morning, the fever broke. Sienna woke to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of waves crashing. She blinked, disoriented by the high ceilings and the silk sheets. This wasn't the hospital. "You're at my home," a deep voice said. She turned her head. Daniel was sitting on the edge of the bed, reading a newspaper. He wore a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and ink. He looked tired, stubble shading his jaw. "The Fortress?" she asked, her voice weak but clear. "The safest place in Illinois," Daniel replied. He folded the paper. "How is the pain?" "Manageable." She tried to sit up, and Daniel immediately reached out, his large hand supporting her back. The touch was electric. For a man so violent, his hands were incredibly gentle. "Careful," he murmured. "You lost a lot of blood." "The kids?" "They are upstairs. Leo has been asking for you every hour. I told him you were sleeping." Sienna relaxed. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Daniel said, standing up and walking to the window. "I did a background check on the nurse we caught at the hospital. She was Penance crew. Your father knows you're with me." Sienna closed her eyes. "He'll come here." "Daniel, you have to let me go. If I leave, he'll follow me. I can't bring this war to your doorstep. Not with the children here." Daniel turned, his silhouette dark against the grey morning light. He let out a short, dark laugh. "You think I'm afraid of Arthur Penance?" He walked back to the bed, leaning down so their faces were inches apart. "Let me make something clear, Sienna. You took a bullet for my blood. That makes you my blood. Nobody touches what is mine." The possessiveness in his voice made her breath hitch. It was terrifying and intoxicating all at once. "Besides," Daniel continued, his voice dropping to a velvety growl, "Silas is still out there. He knows the security protocols of this house. If you leave, you die. If you stay, well, we might all die, but at least we'll die fighting." "That's not comforting," she whispered. "It wasn't meant to be. It's the truth." Suddenly, the heavy oak door to the room banged open. "Sienna!" Leo burst in, escaping the grasp of a frazzled maid. He ran to the bed but stopped short, looking at the bandages and the tubes. His little face crumpled. "Did the bad man hurt you?" Leo asked, tears spilling over. Sienna's heart melted. She ignored the pain in her shoulder and reached out her good arm. "Come here, Leo." Daniel watched as his son climbed carefully onto the bed and curled up next to the daughter of his enemy. Sienna kissed the top of Leo's head, whispering soothing words. It was a domestic scene that felt completely alien to Daniel. He had provided money, security, and structure. But he hadn't provided this warmth. He felt a pang of jealousy, not of Leo, but of the connection. "Papa says you're an angel," Leo whispered loudly. Sienna looked up at Daniel, surprised. Daniel cleared his throat, looking away, his stoic mask slipping for a fraction of a second. I said you were lucky, Leo. Don't misquote me. No, you said angel, Leo insisted. I heard you tell Uncle Lorenzo. The angel is awake. Sienna smiled, a genuine, tired smile that lit up her pale face. Well, your papa is, he exaggerates. Daniel felt a vibration in his pocket. He pulled out his phone. Unknown number. He stepped out onto the balcony, closing the glass doors behind him to shield them from the cold wind and the conversation. Speak, Daniel said. Hello, Dom. The voice was familiar, oily, smug. Silas. Silas, Daniel said, his voice dropping to a whisper that promised unimaginable violence. I'm going to peel the skin off your bones. Such hostility, Silas laughed. I'm just calling to give you a heads up. The Penance family, they aren't working alone. I cut a deal, Dom. The Triad, the Penance crew, and the cartel. We're all coming for the crown. You're coming for a funeral, Daniel retorted. Maybe. But here's the thing. We know about the tunnels under the estate. The ones your father built? The ones you haven't checked in years? Daniel went cold. The escape tunnels. They led directly into the basement of the house. Run, rabbit, run, Silas taunted. The line went dead. Daniel stared at the phone. He turned and looked through the glass. Sienna was laughing at something Leo said. She looked fragile, beautiful, and completely unaware that the wolves weren't at the door. They were already under the floorboards. Daniel holstered his phone and pulled his gun, checking the chamber. The siege of the fortress had begun. The phone call with Silas had changed the atmosphere in the room from a recovery ward to a command center. Daniel didn't explain. He didn't have time to explain. He burst back into the room, holstering his weapon, but keeping his hand on the grip. Lorenzo! Daniel barked into his lapel microphone. Code Black. The basement tunnels. They're compromised. Send Alpha Team to the wine cellar. Beta Team, secure the second floor. Sienna sat up, clutching her shoulder. The sudden movement sent a spike of agony through her chest, but the look in Daniel's eyes, pure, unadulterated predator, flooded her veins with adrenaline. What's happening? She asked, swinging her legs off the bed. Silas, Daniel said, grabbing a tactical vest from a nearby chair and throwing it on over his dress shirt. He sold the security schematics. They're coming up from underneath us. He turned to Leo, who was looking between the adults with wide, fearful eyes. Daniel dropped to one knee. Leo, listen to me. I need you to be a soldier right now. Can you do that? Leo nodded, trembling. Yes, Papa. Take Mia. Go with Sienna. She's going to take you to the library. There is a room behind the bookshelf. Go inside and lock it. Do not open it for anyone but me. Or Lorenzo, Leo added, his voice small. No, Daniel said, his voice hard. Only me. Daniel looked at Sienna. He reached into his waistband and pulled out a secondary weapon, a compact Sig Sauer P3 Lags 5. He pressed it into her good hand. Do you know how to use this? Sienna looked at the gun. It was heavy, cold. She hadn't held one since she left Detroit, since the nights her father forced her to practice shooting cans in the backyard until her fingers bled. Yes, she whispered. Safety is off. One in the chamber. If anyone comes through that door who isn't me, you empty the clip. Do you understand? Daniel, do you understand? He roared, the desperation cracking through his stoic mask. Yes. Go. Daniel turned and sprinted into the hallway, heading for the stairs to the basement. Sienna grabbed Leo's hand, ignored the screaming pain in her shoulder, and ran for the library. Down in the depths of the fortress, the air was cool and smelled of vintage wine and damp earth. Daniel moved silently down the stone steps, followed by 3 of his best men. The wine cellar was a labyrinth of oak barrels and floor-to-ceiling racks. At the far end, Hidden behind a large cask was the door to the old prohibition tunnels. It was supposed to be sealed with steel bars. As they approached, Daniel saw the sparks. Zzzt! Someone was cutting through the hinges with a thermal lance. "Contact front!" Daniel shouted. The heavy oak door was kicked in, and a canister rolled across the floor. Flash bang! Boom! The world went white. A high-pitched ringing shattered Daniel's eardrums. He fired blindly into the doorway, the recoil jarring his arms. Gunfire erupted from the tunnel, automatic weapons suppressing fire. It was deafening in the enclosed space. Wood splintered, wine bottles shattered, spraying red liquid everywhere that looked too much like blood. Daniel dove behind a stack of crates. His vision was clearing. Figures were pouring out of the smoke. They were wearing gas masks and tactical gear, not street thugs. "Pros, hold the line!" Daniel yelled. He popped up and fired 2 controlled shots. The lead intruder dropped, but there were too many. Silas wasn't lying. This was a siege. Daniel checked his ammo. He had 2 mags left. He looked at his men. One was down, bleeding from the neck. Then his earpiece crackled. It wasn't Lorenzo. It was Silas. "Wrong way, Dom." Daniel froze. "You really think I'd send the main force through a fatal funnel like a tunnel?" Silas's voice was distorted, laughing. "That was just the noise, the distraction. Where are you?" Daniel snarled, firing at the shadows. "I'm already inside, brother. I'm up on the first floor. I'm going to get the girl." Daniel's blood ran cold. He looked at the tunnel. The men shooting at him weren't trying to advance. They were just pinning him down, keeping him in the basement while the real wolves hunted upstairs. "Retreat!" Daniel screamed to his remaining men. "Get to the stairs! Move!" He broke cover, firing wildly to suppress the tunnel team, and sprinted back toward the staircase. He had to get to the library. He had to get to Sienna. He had left them alone. Sienna locked the heavy mahogany door of the library. It wouldn't hold for long against a battering ram. But it was a delay. She hustled Leo and Mia toward the false bookshelf that hid the panic room. Her shoulder was on fire. Every heartbeat pumped agony through her wound, but she pushed it down. She needed to be clear-headed. "Get in," she whispered, pushing the bookshelf open. The panic room was small, lined with concrete, stocked with water and monitors. "Sienna, come in," Leo cried, pulling at her hand. Sienna looked at the security monitors on the wall inside the panic room. The feeds cycled through the house. The basement feed was static. The kitchen feed showed broken glass. The main hallway feed. Sienna froze. Walking down the main hall, flanked by 2 men in suits, was a man she knew. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was wearing a casual blue hoodie under a suit jacket, chewing on a toothpick. Silas. And he wasn't alone. Walking behind him, limping slightly, was an older man with silver hair and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He carried a cane, but he didn't need it. Arthur Pennant's. Her father. Sienna felt the air leave her lungs. He was here, inside the house. On the screen, Silas stopped at the library door. He pulled out a keycard. A master key. "He has the key," Sienna whispered. She looked at the panic room door. If she went inside with the children, Silas would eventually override the lock. He knew the codes. He was the chief of staff. It was a metal coffin. She had to draw them away. "Leo," Sienna said, her voice shaking but firm. She knelt down, gripping his small shoulders. "I need you to close this door. Lock it from the inside. There is a red button. Push it. Do not open it until your papa comes. Do you promise?" "No. Sienna, no. I have to go help Papa," she lied. She kissed his forehead. "Be brave." She pushed the kids inside and slammed the heavy steel door. She heard the locks engage. They were safe for now. Sienna turned around. She stood in the middle of the vast library. She held the Sig Sauer in her left hand, her good hand. It felt heavy. The library door handle turned. It didn't open. She had engaged the deadbolt. Then, a voice came through the wood. "Sienna, darling, open up. Daddy's home." The sound of Arthur's voice, gravel and smoke, sent a primal shiver of terror down her spine. It was the voice of her nightmares. "Go to hell!" she shouted, raising the gun. "Standard negotiation tactic," Silas's voice joined in. "Blow the hinges." Boom! The door exploded inward. Splinters rained down. Sienna didn't hesitate. She fired. Bang! Bang! She missed Arthur, who stepped smoothly behind the doorframe, but she hit one of the mercenaries in the leg. He went down screaming. "Feisty!" Arthur called out. "You never did like your shooting lessons, did you? You always flinched." "I'm not flinching now," Sienna yelled. Her hand was shaking, but her aim was true on the doorway. "We don't want the kids," Silas shouted. "We just want the Vane Empire, and your father wants you. Give up, Sienna. Daniel is dead in the basement. It's over. Daniel is dead." The words hit her harder than the bullet had. No, he couldn't be. He was invincible. "Liar!" she screamed and fired again. The slide locked back. She was out of ammo. Daniel had given her a gun, but no spare magazine. Silence fell over the room. Arthur stepped into the doorway. He looked impeccable, terrifyingly calm. He looked at his daughter, then at the empty gun. "That was a spirited effort," Arthur said, walking slowly into the room. Silas followed, gun drawn. "But you're coming home, Sienna. You have a marriage to attend to. The cartel leader's son is very eager to meet you. It's part of the alliance." Sienna backed up until she hit the desk. "I'd rather die." "That can be arranged," Silas smirked, raising his weapon. "We only need you alive for the wedding ceremony. After that, crash." The floor-to-ceiling window behind Sienna shattered inward. A figure swung in on a rappel line from the upper balcony, smashing through the glass in a shower of diamonds. Daniel Vane landed in a crouch between Sienna and the men. He was covered in dust, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his eyes glowing with demonic rage. He held a submachine gun in each hand. "Get away from my wife!" Daniel growled. He didn't say nanny. He didn't say girlfriend. He said wife. Arthur Pennance paused, looking amused. "Wife? I didn't get an invitation." "The wedding is right now," Daniel said. "And you're the sacrifice." Daniel opened fire. The noise was cataclysmic. Arthur dove behind a leather sofa. Silas scrambled for cover behind a marble bust. Daniel didn't stop. He unleashed a hail of bullets, shredding the furniture, the books, the walls. "Get down!" Daniel grabbed Sienna by the waist and pulled her behind the heavy oak desk. He reloaded in a second, his movements a blur. "You're alive," Sienna sobbed, clinging to his tactical vest. "I told you," Daniel panted, checking the corner of the desk. "I don't die easy. Are the kids safe?" "Panic room, locked." "Good." Daniel looked at her. He wiped a smudge of soot from her cheek with his thumb. "You held them off. You did good, Angel." "They said," Arthur said. "I heard him," Daniel said grimly. "He wants to sell you to the cartel, over my dead body." "Daniel!" Silas shouted from across the room. "You're outgunned. I have 20 men coming up the stairs. You have 2 clips left. It's simple math." Daniel looked at Sienna. He saw the terror in her eyes, but also the trust. She was looking at him like he was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Do you trust me?" Daniel asked. "Yes." "This house is rigged," Daniel whispered. "My father was paranoid. There's a gas main override. I can blow the West Wing. It'll take out the library, the hall, and everyone in it." Sienna's eyes widened. "We'll die." "The panic room is reinforced. It's a bunker. It will survive the blast. The kids will be safe. But we have to make a run for the window. We have to jump. It was a suicide pact. A jump from the second story into the freezing darkness, followed by an explosion that would level the building. "Do it," Sienna said. Daniel kissed her. It was hard, desperate, and tasted of blood and ash. It was a promise. He pulled a small remote from his vest pocket. He armed it. "Silas!" Daniel shouted, standing up. "You forgot one variable in your math." "Yeah? What's that?" Silas popped his head up. "I'm not a businessman." Daniel smiled, his teeth white in the gloom. "I'm a pyromaniac." He pressed the button. A deep, guttural thump shook the foundation of the house. The walls groaned. "Run!" Daniel grabbed Sienna's hand. They bolted for the shattered window. Behind them, the floor erupted. A fireball, orange and angry, roared up from the basement, consuming the library, the books, and the screaming men. Daniel and Sienna leaped into the night air as the world behind them turned into an inferno. The air was a violent mixture of freezing wind and scorching heat. Daniel and Sienna hit the snowbank beneath the library window hard. The deep, drifted snow broke their fall, but the impact still knocked the wind out of them. A split second later, the shockwave hit. The west wing of the fortress disintegrated. A bloom of orange fire roared into the night sky, shattering the remaining glass and sending a plume of smoke twisting up toward the stars. The ground shook as the library collapsed into the basement, burying the secrets, the sins, and the men who had come to destroy them. Daniel covered Sienna's body with his own, shielding her from the falling debris. They lay there in the snow, breathless, hearts hammering against each other's chests, illuminated by the flickering light of the inferno. "Stay down," Daniel rasped, coughing. "The kids," Sienna choked out, trying to scramble up. "They are safe. The panic room is a concrete box. It's designed to survive a direct mortar hit. They're fine." Daniel rolled off her, wincing. He checked his limbs. Nothing broken. Just bruises on top of bruises. He looked at the burning house. There was no movement from the library ruins. No one could have survived that. Silas, the traitor who sold his soul for silver, and Arthur, the father who sold his daughter for power. They were gone. The fire was a cleansing thing. It burned away the past. Headlights swept across the lawn. Lorenzo's team, the ones who had retreated from the basement just in time, came tearing up the driveway in armored SUVs. Fire trucks were wailing in the distance. Lorenzo jumped out, his face soot-stained. He saw Daniel and Sienna in the snow and let out a breath of relief. "Boss, you crazy son of a bitch! You actually blew the wing!" "It was infested," Daniel said, helping Sienna to her feet. She leaned heavily on him, her shoulder bleeding through the bandages again, but she was alive. "Get the extraction team. Cut through the external hatch of the panic room. Get my children." 3 months later, the winter had finally broken. Chicago was thawing, the grey slush replaced by the tentative green of early spring. Daniel stood on the balcony of his penthouse in the city. The fortress was being rebuilt, bigger, stronger, and without the tunnels. But for now, they were living in the skyline. He adjusted his cufflinks. He was nervous. Daniel Vane, the man who had stared down a barrel more times than he could count, was terrified. "Papa, do I look okay?" Daniel turned. Leo was standing there in a miniature tuxedo. Mia was twirling in a white flower girl dress. "You look sharp, Leo. Mia, you look like a princess." "Is Sienna coming?" Leo asked. "She's waiting for us." They took the private elevator down to the roof garden. It had been transformed. White roses, thousands of them, lined the aisle. A string quartet played softly. Sienna stood by the railing, looking out at the city. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She wasn't wearing bandages. She was wearing a gown of midnight blue silk that hugged every curve. Her hair was down, cascading over her shoulders. She looked regal. She looked like a queen. She turned as they approached. Her eyes lit up. "Look at you two." She hugged the twins, but her eyes locked on Daniel. The past 3 months had been a blur of recovery. Surgeries, physical therapy, and police statements that Daniel's lawyers made disappear. But through it all, they hadn't talked about that moment in the library. The moment he called her his wife. Daniel stepped forward. He dismissed the security detail with a wave of his hand. "Sienna," he said. His voice was deep, steady. "Mr. Vane," she teased gently. "Daniel," he corrected. "I have a confession to make." "Oh, I lied in the library." Sienna's smile faltered slightly. "About what?" "I called you my wife. That was a lie." Daniel reached into his pocket. He pulled out a ring. It wasn't a delicate diamond. It was a massive, flawless emerald, surrounded by black diamonds. It was a Vane family heirloom, worn by the matriarchs who ruled alongside the kings. "It was a lie," Daniel said, dropping to one knee. "But I intend to make it the truth." Sienna gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "You took a bullet for my blood," Daniel said, looking up at her with an intensity that burned hotter than the fire at the estate. "You saved my children. You saved me. I don't want a nanny, Sienna. I don't want an employee. I want a partner. I want the angel who walked through hell and came out the other side holding my hand." "Daniel." Tears streamed down her face. "Marry me," he commanded softly. "Take my name. Let the penance name burn with your father. Be a Vane." Sienna looked at the ring, then at Leo and Mia, who were grinning widely, and finally at the man who had terrified her, protected her, and loved her. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes." Daniel slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He stood up and kissed her, deep and slow, claiming her in front of the city they now owned together. As they broke the kiss, Leo tugged on Daniel's jacket. "Papa? Is she staying forever now?" Daniel looked down at his son, then wrapped his arm around Sienna's waist, pulling her flush against him. "Yeah, kid." Daniel smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "She's not going anywhere. The angel is home." And that is the story of how a single bullet changed the fate of the Chicago underworld. Daniel thought he was hiring a nanny, but he ended up finding the one woman strong enough to rule beside him. From the freezing snow of Millennium Park to the fiery ruins of the Vane estate, Sienna proved that loyalty isn't about bloodlines. It's about who is willing to bleed for you. What did you think of Daniel's decision to blow up his own house? And would you have forgiven your enemy's daughter? Let me know in the comments below. If this story gave you chills, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new Mafia romance story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter.